Hello there. This is Dave Lewis. I'm the training director for the Dallas region of Destination Imagination here in the wonderful facilities of Christar. So a shout out to them and a thank you for your great generosity. This is part of our ongoing training series of what appraisers wish team managers knew. And today we're going to talk about getting unstuck. We occasionally see this in February, and it's tragic to behold a team that loses their way during the 8 minutes of their performance. That's actually very painful for the appraisers because they know we can't help them. We can't suggest anything to get them going. But for every team that gets stuck during a performance, you have 7 or 8 who get stuck in January. And usually the team will say, you know what, this idea is just not panning out the way that we wanted it to, and it's kind of getting hard, and we've just run out of ideas, and maybe we should trash the whole thing and start over. The reason they're doing this is because, one, they remember the excitement of firing new ideas off and everything, and the initial blush of success that happens when things start working and when ideas are pinging around and everybody's having fun. But when it gets down to the work of making these things work, it gets a little more difficult. And usually if you'll explain that to them, they'll say, you know what, now that you think, and now that you mention it, it took us 4 months to get here, and we're giving ourselves 3 weeks to start over and do the whole thing again. Maybe not. That's usually all that it takes. But you do have teams that get stuck. And usually if they get stuck in a more cognitive way, more a performance-oriented kind of a thing, then you need some of these techniques. So the first one that I would say is simple, which is just restate the problem. What is going on here? What is stopping us? What's holding us up? What has stopped us? And you can, because usually the question is the answer is going to lie in the question. So if you sit down and say, okay, what are the challenge requirements? Set that down on one side, and then how have we addressed it? How does it stack up? All right. What about this is a really good one, is to restate the problem. Sit down with a thesaurus and take your problem, write it out. What is it that's our problem? And then you write it down again using synonyms. Word for word synonyms, except for the articles and a few prepositions, right? That usually does the trick. If it doesn't, then okay, we need to manipulate our scale. This is one of those story tricks that we've talked about earlier. Maybe I shouldn't have erased that, but break it into pieces. I have a friend some years back told me that he said he was telling me about a problem that he'd encountered, and he said, you know what? He says, if I'd run out of paint sooner, I wouldn't have painted myself into this corner. And so that's one of those nice little turnarounds that it's a deep insight because he was thinking about his problem in terms of what he had too much of instead of what he had too little of. If you've got a team that's saying we've got too little of this, then you must have too much of something else. That may be a restatement of the problem. And generally, if you start looking at what you've got too little of, what you've got too much of, that will define the places where your problem breaks out. Here's another one is, your problem is part of a bigger one. Say what? Say what? Yes, in the scheme of what this is going to do to your lives, this is going to screw up your chances of getting into your favorite college. This is going to go in your, no, it's not going to go on your permanent record. If you can do that, you kind of restore a sense of perspective. My favorite approach to a stuck team is turning the problem around. And let's say, okay, let's sit down and let's list the ways we can fail. List ways to fail. Have the whole team sit down. This is kind of a mini brainstorm. How can we really louse this up? How can we really embarrass ourselves on stage on tournament day? How can we make the principal think, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do DI ever again? How can we mess it up that royally? Okay. Once we've made a list of those things, we say, okay, we'll do the opposite of those. And then we reverse the steps. How did we get into this mess? I suppose you might call it retracing your steps. You find out how you got into this mess and you back out of it. That's usually the most effective way. Now, only once in my experience have I thrown all these tools out of my toolbox, brought them to bear, and the team was still stuck. Fortunately, it wasn't my team. It was someone else's problem, but I did call out the last one, and this is for a variety of reasons, because you are actually going into young people's subconsciouses and everything. This is really a tool of last resort, which is to call on I'll go on and start saying it. Call on your inner heroes. The way this plays out is that you have the whole team sit around the table, eyes closed, relax, clear their minds, and think about the one person in the whole world, living or dead, that they admire most. It could be Abraham Lincoln, it could be Martin Luther King, it could be Maya Angelou, it could be Gandhi, anyone. Think about that person. Now, while you're sitting there relaxed and you're facing this problem because the team is stuck, you don't know how to fix it. That person just walked into the room, put their hand on your shoulder, leaned over, and said something to you. What did they say? Have them write it down. Because that person you admire most is your inner hero. That person that you admire most, the person that you think is the greatest thing ever, is the one you want to be. It's the one you kind of believe you can be. And so there's your inner hero. And what does your inner hero say? Your inner hero is not afraid to address the problem squarely, is not afraid to try something really remarkable, to try something bold. audacious. Now, because we're dealing with your subconscious, we're exposing your inner hero. There's a lot of self-disclosure going on here, and so I don't like to coax that kind of thing out of a child. And that's the reason I call it a last resort. When your team gets that advice, the actual advice is really largely immaterial, but they do get in touch with their inner heroes. They find their own heroism, their own nobility, their own competence. This exercise is going to suffuse the pragmatic selves with confidence and nobility, and once you've got 5 to 7 young people doing that, the problem itself, the problem of being stuck, doesn't stand a chance. Go get them.